already know who it is. It's the radioactive pop with Danny Limelight, the United Wrestling Network World Heavyweight Champion. And make sure you tune into the Alliance blog every week. You heard it here first. Straight from Poppy.
Okay, guys, we're back. Did you miss us? Because we missed you.
Rules?
There are no rules.
What rules?
This is a revolution, damn it.
You'll hear things you've never heard before.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
Who are those guys?
And then there's the other guys.
We're the other guys. We're the guys nobody ever bets on.
The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
It's time for the Other Alliance Guys podcast with your hosts, Tim, Dave, and Jeremy.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And what can we tell you? We are the Other Alliance Guys. Not the good ones, we're the other ones. A presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information around the National Wrestling Alliance, various independents around the world. My name is Tim. I am joined firstly by our fantasy booker supreme. You're the sorcerer supreme of fantasy booking. It's Dave Scooby. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to tonight's show.
Yeah, man. And championship wrestling from Jeremy, fighting out of the great state of Denver. How are you, buddy?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Sitting here getting a giggle out of the Willie Bowen Tyrus joke of the week.
Oh, let's take a look.
Yes, she's a doozy.
Tyrus has a nice statue of himself in Missouri. Unfortunately, it melted. Came the Mississippi River. Tyrus will never escape Willie's wrath.
Nope.
I'm going to pitch later on tonight the Discord. And Willie, I want you in the Discord, man. We haven't seen you in the Discord. You got to be in there. Lots of people in there. But speak up if you're in the chat. Lots of people watching right now. Tonight, on the eve of the Philadelphia Eagles cruising past the Washington Commanders, draining the swamp in Washington, if you will, 55-23. Hopefully no spoilers there. We are, yeah, it didn't feel that way for a while, but hey, that's how it ended up. We are going to be talking about a number of things. First of all, thanks, Willie. Glad you're going to be in the Discord. Two new offerings for candidacy into the Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame. We'll give you an update of where we are with the first four. Yeah. And these two gentlemen here will be arguing for and against those two choices, which I'm laughing. I'm laughing because of the title of the show and Jeremy's thumbnail for this show. Just fantastic.
I had fun making this thumbnail this week. As soon as I saw who it was, I instantly had an idea of how I was going to play this one out, and I love how it turned out. This is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love. I mean, they're both great on both sides of the thing, but I love Cabana screaming or CM Punk screaming, but Cabana. Hey, it's connecting people through wrestling. It has been a while. I love this guy.
Yes.
Chicago.
What is up, bro?
Yeah. It was. It's Colt Cabana. It's Colt Cabana. It's on the and the Sheik under a Repo Man mask. Anyway, we'll get to that. We will get to that. And Jeremy's going to talk about TNA's first live show in 8 years and what's good and what's bad from it, if anything at all. And then Dave's going to weave his fantasy booking magic and to ask the question, what would happen if WCW had never gone out of business? So it's going to be a fun ride for the next 90 minutes. Let's get to it. The Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame, as I like to recap on sometimes, is built around those wrestlers, talent, movers, and shakers who have been active during the AllianceWrestling.com era, which is about the past 17 or 18 years, and who have had an indie bend, an NWA or UWN or independent bend, and have meant something during that period of time. the inner circle, of which we are just a fraction of the alliance, came up with a list that we are going through on this show week by week, 2 at a time for singles. It'll take us a little while. Then we'll move into tag teams. Then we'll move into women's, and then we're gonna do movers and shakers, promoters, managers, the whole bit. It's gonna take the full year. But as we do that, I can give you the update first of all on where we've been. Number one, the first nominee that we have had this year was that we put to voting by you guys who are in the Alliance fam and watching, was Adam Pearce. There was not a single dissenting vote against Adam Pearce joining the Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame. He was unanimously elected by the Alliance. And now that I say that, I'm going to completely forget who we had on the up against him at that time, but I'll pull my...
Josephus.
Was it Josephus at the same time?
I believe so, yeah.
Yep. All right, well, Josephus was the only one of the first four who did not make the required 75% of the votes to get into the Alliance Hall of Fame. It doesn't mean he can't be renominated because he got 60% of the votes, but he did not make it on the first ballot. We also had Nick Aldis, who was, I think he might have had one dissenting vote, but he crushed it in getting into the Alliance Hall of Fame as well. And Tim Storm also made it with just about as many votes as Nick Aldis did to be inducted. So we'll be maybe even working with Trophy Smack, one of the sponsors, later this year. We'll see how that goes. We'll see if Jay wants to spend any money or not. Otherwise, it'll be...
The question, Tim, is if Nick Aldis goes into the Alliance Hall of Fame, is he going to be in the ham sandwich wing?
Automatically.
Automatically.
Him and him alone, even. He is
the only one in there.
The sole occupant of the ham sandwich jabroni wing.
Maybe we could individually make trophies and his plaque can be a ham sandwich somehow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and so those four guys are in. Tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of new people. The first one of which is, and both of these I think are going to be some good arguments. We want you guys to join in the chat as always. Nominee number 5 for the Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame single male wrestlers, Colt Cabana. Arguing for Colt Cabana, unless I have written it incorrectly, is Dave Scooby. Just take it away, buddy.
All right. Well, Cabana, known by his quote-unquote real name, Scott Colton, he's an American pro wrestler, color commentator, and a podcaster. He was podcasting back when it really wasn't the cool thing to do, but he has over 400 shows of the art of wrestling. If you have a chance, go listen to some of them. Colt Cabana as a wrestler, a lot of people don't know him as a serious wrestler unless you've gone back and looked at his work. That he's looked upon as quote unquote the comedy wrestler, Colt Boom Boom Cabana, also known as the mass wrestler Matt Classic in Wrestle Society X. But I mean, he's done just about everything there is to do in wrestling. And I like that he can play just about any role. He's done color commentary for ROH. He's now currently working for AEW and ROH as a coach. He has the experience. He saw a little time in WWF, WWE back in the days of OVW, and then Florida Championship Wrestling before it became NXT. He was on SmackDown for a while, going by Scotty Coleman. But it was one of these things of he didn't fit in, and I think that was a good thing, being that a lot of people want to take it all the way to the big time, which WWE was looked upon as the big time back then. But it's one of these things that he goes all the way back to Steel Domain Wrestling back in 2000. So he's been wrestling for close to 25 years. He was trained by, let's see, well, first off, before his training, he and CM Punk started in Chicago together. So if there wasn't a Colt Cabana, who knows if there would be a CM Punk. That they did the Second City Saints. I mean, they've wrestled. Ace Steel was one of their trainers. He's been in ROH. He's been in Shikara. He's had several different identities, being Colt Cabana, Colt Boom Boom Cabana, Matt Classic, the the masked wrestler. He was in Wrestling Society X on MTV. He's been a mainstay of the indies. He's been just about anywhere and everywhere. He's been in Europe. He's been in Puerto Rico, been down to Mexico, been in Germany. He's wrestled just about everywhere. And if you just know Colt Cabana as a comedy wrestler, he has quite a bit that you can look upon and go, okay, just type into your Google machine, go on YouTube, wherever, and just type in the 7 levels of hate. Him and Adam Pearce, oh my God, that is just, if you didn't follow the NWA back then, and you're just learning about it now, just go watch it. It is worth a watch. You will see wrestling, quote unquote, as the NWA says now, wrestling as it's meant to be. That, in my opinion, was one of the best series of wrestling that was ever put out. Now, going back, let's see here. Sorry, so many notes. Colt Cabana goes back to in time in ROH when Bryan Danielson was the world champion. And ROH, he ended up battling him in Philadelphia for the championship. And this was one of those things where Danielson won, and rather than beating him, quote unquote, as a wrestler, he went after him as a brawler, and it didn't work out. So he earned a rematch against Danielson in Chicago and once again lost. So he had one last shot against Danielson for the ROH World Championship. They fought to a 60-minute time limit draw in a 2-out-of-3 match. And this is what set both wrestlers on their way. That if you look at it in ROH, a lot of the wrestlers that ended up coming out of ROH made it big in WWE and then would go on to some in AEW. But Colt Cabana was always surrounded by very good wrestlers. And if you look at what he did, he was able to work just about any style, even the comedy style, which sometimes I enjoy. But most of the time, if you watch Colt wrestle, he knows what he's doing. But he's able to fit in almost any situation that's needed. Wherever he goes, he can be an opening match. He can be the main event. It's just wherever needed, he can fit in. Now, after he was in the WWE, he was on SmackDown for a little while. After he was released, he returned to the independent circuit in 2009. He made his return to Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, where he ended up challenging Chris Hero. And in going after the championship, the PWG World Championship, in a three-way match, which included the Human Tornado, Hero ended up retaining the belt by pinning Tornado. Afterwards, promised Cabana a one-on-one shot, but ended up not getting that chance. He then returned to ROH. He put aside what differences he had with Bryan Danielson, and they ended up at the 7th anniversary show, ended up wrestling Bison Smith and Jimmy Rave on later that year in April of 2009. He got a world title shot against Jerry Lynn, but ended up losing. It was one of these things, anybody that he was in the ring with, like I said before, he can make anybody look good, whether it was an opening match or the main event. He ended up in 2011 winning the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Adam Pearce at NWA Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. He then lost the title to the Sheik, who we'll be talking about a little later. And that was roughly maybe a month and a half later. It was, in my opinion, too short of a title run, but we'll talk about that in a little while. Then on April 8th of 2012, he defeated Adam Pearce once again to win the World Heavyweight Championship, the NWA, for the second time. He lost the title back to Pearce in July of that year. And in October of that year, they concluded their 7-match series, the 7 Levels of Hate, which we've talked about some, but we'll go into some of those matches hopefully later on down the line. In 2016, he returned to ROH, became a wrestler and a color commentator. Ended up challenging ROH champion Jay Lethal at Global War, but the match ended up with a no contest when the Bullet Club took over the ring. September of that year at All-Star Extravaganza, Cabana and Dalton Castle defeated the All Night Express. Later that year, they ended up going on a battle between it was Dalton Castle and Cabana, and Dalton Castle, along with the boys, never could get the best of Colt Cabana. So it was one of these things that, out of respect down the line, he had a battle with Dalton Castle and the boys throughout the next year, became more active as a color commentator along with Ian Riccaboni, and they set their differences aside and ended up basically showing respect for each other in the ring of honor, and basically hugging it out. So it's in 2017, Cabana ended up becoming a commentator for ROH. And like I said, he battled with Dalton Castle throughout the next year. Also, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading my own writing. Later on in 2019 at the Crockett Cup, Colt Cabana won the National Heavyweight Championship from Willie Mack, and later that year he lost the championship to James Storm, but ended up regaining it in a victory on Power. He then lost the title to Aaron Stevens in a triple threat, which included Ricky Starks at the NWA pay-per-view Into the Fire. Later that year in 2019 and going into 2020, he went to New Japan Pro. And in February of 2019, it was announced he was one of the 32 participants in the New Japan 2019 Cup. He stated that he would be making his official return. He was eliminated in the New Japan Cup in the quarterfinals by Sonata, and then later that year ended up having multiple appearances for AEW. Ended up signing with the promotion in February of 2020. Made a surprise entrance at Revolution in February of that year and ended up attacking the Dark Order. In May of that year, he began a losing streak. And then Brody Lee tried to recruit him into the Dark Order. He ended up having a battle with the Dark Order. Then they ended up setting their views aside, and he ended up teaming with Brody Lee. Ended up going against Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss. They ended up defeating them. Over the next few weeks, Cabana experienced a winning streak while teaming with members of the Dark Order, and they slowly ended up recruiting him into the group. And in doing so, he turned heel for, I believe, roughly the first time in his career. While he may not have always been a face, he was never looked upon as being a heel. Following the death of Brody Lee, Cabana, alongside the rest of the Dark Order, transitioned back into baby faces. He wrestled his final match as a member of Dark Order in August of 2022. Currently, Cabana is a wrestling coach, a sometimes wrestler, and a producer for All Elite Wrestling and Ring of Honor. And like I said, he had a podcast called The Art of Wrestling, which has over 400 episodes. If you have a chance, check it out. It's very good, in my opinion. And back in 2012, he was ranked number 44 in the top 500 singles wrestlers in the PWI Top 500. In the NWA, he's a two-time NWA World Heavyweight Championship holder of the 10 pounds of gold and a two-time National Heavyweight Champion. He's also an OVW TV champ and a Southern Tag Team Champion of OVW, and a two-time ROH Tag Champ with the infamous CM Punk. So there you go. It's Colt Cabana, Colt Boom Boom Cabana, Scotty Coleman, Scotty Goldman, whatever you want to call him. I call him a Alliance Hall of Fame nominee. In my opinion, while he never hit the highlight of a WWF big career for an indie wrestler to be where he was and done what he has, he is Hall of Fame worthy.
I think that's an excellent argument, comprehensive for sure. I always thought Colt, like a lot of people's opinions for Colt Cabana, and I try to keep my comments minimum because this is about you guys and arguing back and forth. But I always thought that a lot of people's opinions of Colt came from liking Jim Cornette or liking CM Punk. And yeah, we don't know what the hell happened back there. I would try to keep that in mind. But former NWA World Champion, as you say, arguing against the nomination of Colt Boom Boom Cabana into the Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame. Jeremy, what do you got for us, brother?
It's fucking unfortunate that I have to come on here and explain why Colt Cabana shouldn't be in the Alliance. Colt Cabana couldn't catch and hold up a company falling backwards. He went to China and fought Nick Aldis for the 10 pounds of gold. Who did he take with him? Nobody. He didn't ask Jake how to go with him. Hell, Nick Aldis didn't either, for that matter. But we know how Nick Aldis feels about our own Jake How. Nick feels that he's a ham sandwich jabroni. So maybe Colt feels that way too. He's easily influenced. He doesn't have his own bank account. Shares that with his mother.
Right.
He didn't ask Jake how to go. I feel out of pure jealousy for the fact that J. Cal, our very own, looks like Kevin Owens and would have stolen the spotlight and been the bigger name, a bigger draw of the two. So therefore, you know, it is what it is. He took on Adam Pearce 7 times. Yes, the 7 levels of hate. Excellent series of matches. Very persistent little bastard, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
But if you take how many times that he actually won in that, and translate that into a batting average, he wouldn't make a little league. He wouldn't make a little league t-ball team. I mean, come on, man. Hall of Fame. I need a muffin. All jokes aside, I completely concur with Dave. The man. The man is he has proven time and time again that he truly loves this business, and I have no real arguments against the guy going in. I just found an opportunity and seized it.
Well, that's what you got to do. That's what you're here for, you guys, to argue against people you probably don't want to argue against.
Yep.
7 levels of hate, guys. I was in the Discord today. I said it's top 5 feuds for me. It might be top 2 feuds for me. Like, I love that shit.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think that we should cover it as I may do that. I may just go back and that may be what I do next week for the next couple of weeks is just do a deep dive into the 7 levels in those matches and give my take on them, because I've watched them a couple of times, but it's always been kind of as a background thing. So maybe I'll sit down and actually pay attention and see what I see.
Jammin, who's here, said it was great, and the documentary about Ford is great as well.
Yeah,
it's really worth the watch. You can, I think Retro's got it on DVD, the actual 7 levels, but like you can get it somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think the documentary's online. It used to be on Adam Pearce's website. I don't know about now though. But it was.
I believe it still is. I believe it still is.
Okay, it was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated second runner-up, so it finished 3rd. I always like to say this whenever we talk about it, for feud of the year in a time when nobody cared about the NWA.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and with respect to Colt and Adam Pearce, and nobody was watching,
Nope.
and it made the 3rd runner-up. Like even PWI went, damn, you know, like 7 matches in 7 cities, or I don't know how many different countries. Well, at least 2 anyway. But one was in Australia. I remember that. But it's on Adam's YouTube page. Retro says, and yeah, it's on YouTube. Says Jim. So there you go. That's number 5. We're gonna turn it over to number 6, and the title of tonight's broadcast is there an 8th level of hate? I didn't know if people were going to hate Colt Cabana or they would hate the next nominee, the almighty Sheik, the Sheik for short. We're not talking about the Sheik from Detroit. We're talking about the former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, the Sheik, who was already mentioned. And well, Jeremy, I think you're arguing for this time the inclusion of the Sheik into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm the one that made this submission and arguing for the merits as to why conniving, backstabbing title thieves should be allowed into the Alliance Hall of Fame. What can you say about Joseph Kabibo that hasn't already been said many times over? As I stated, he's a hell of a thief. He had a great opportunity to represent the NWA and carry its title and with honor and pride, and He did that right out the door into a fucking car down the road and never came back. I have nothing nice to say about Joseph Samael, other than that he was a moving force of getting Contra Unit going in the MLW and helping to raise the profile of Jacob Fatu. He does not deserve to be in any Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
This is Jeremy arguing for.
I specifically nominated him and one other person in the hopes that I would get to argue for so I could completely argue against him. Do my own fucking thing. I'm pulling a Joseph Cabibbo right now and just doing me.
Okay.
Fuck you, buddy.
For those who don't know, I think that the as Dave will, I'll let Dave go, but there was that whole, during the 7 levels of hate, he somehow ended up getting himself into the World Championship. And, and as Jeremy kind of points out, he left with the World Championship. He took the title and ran. I mean, as it has been explained to me by those who were there, he physically took the title, and whatever happened between him and the board, well, I mean, I don't know, but Dave may wish to argue this point. Dave, tell us why the almighty Sheik is less than almighty and doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, just so I don't end up doing no, he doesn't belong, and that's that. I'm just going to give a brief history of Joseph Samael, a.k.a. the Sheik, also known as Joe Cabibbo. From his Wikipedia page, he is an American professional wrestler / manager, currently wrestling under the name Joseph Samael on the independent circuit. I looked, he's very rarely, if anything, wrestled from about 2015 on. He was in MLW as a member and founder of Contra Unit with Jacob Fatu and Simon Gotch. He's also one-time NWA holder of the 10 pounds of gold and a 0-1 world heavyweight champion. I'm not sure how he got to where he was, but he did get there. His early career started back in 98. He worked early in his career in the Florida independent promotions such as Future of Wrestling and Coastal Championship Wrestling. In 2001, he made his debut in Puerto Rico for the World Wrestling Council. I guess back then, if you could get down there and wrestle, they'd take just about anybody. It's one of those things of, I'm not saying I wish they would have pulled a Bruiser Brody, but if the shoe fits, it could have happened. It's one of those things that I really don't wish hate upon many people, but I don't get this guy. I've watched some of his matches. While he's passable in the ring, he cuts a very good promo, but he's better as a spokesperson than he is as a full-time wrestler. Back in 2005, he debuted in Full Impact Pro, which was a sister promotion to ROH. Now, when he started in Full Impact Pro, he was known as Joey Machete. And to me, that's a good name. It's passable. But he ended up teaming up with Sean Murphy, who I looked up, and Sean Murphy was nobody special at that time. They won their first match against Tony Mamaluke and Chad Parnham in April of that year. They ended up going on a winning streak and ended up beating the Heartbreak Express to become the tag team champions. They ended up leaving the promotion a few years later after losing a hardcore match to the Dark City Fight Club. At that time, he was considered a big fish in a small pond. He's always seemed to be where he is the bigger man, and he can talk himself into these matches. A lot of the time, he's in promotions that didn't have big name stars, and because he could talk, he talked his way into feuds rather than being able to wrestle. While he could wrestle, that was sometimes put on the back burner. He was a talker, not so much a fighter. He'd wrestle when needed. In late 2008, he made Pro Wrestling Fusion his home. He changed his name to Sheik Ali Azad. He then shortened the name after receiving the blessing of Sabu, who's the nephew of the original Sheik. And this is one of those things that if I was Sabu, I would have charged him to use the name myself. Make some money off of him. If you're going to use a name and you're no relation, you got to pay to play.
Yep.
Now, he ended up winning the NWA Florida heavyweight title by defeating Freedom Rider back in May of 2008. He also developed a feud with Steve Madison. These guys were not well-known names, but they were names in the Florida independents. And at this time in wrestling, NWA was anywhere and everywhere. And just because you wrestled for a promotion, that had NWA in the name, didn't mean that they were, quote unquote, part of the National Wrestling Alliance. They were in name only. So a lot of the times, these titles only were NWA in name. So if you look back, holders of these titles, it's one of these things of, unless it was the 10 pounds of gold, and then sometimes even holders of the 10 pounds of gold, you were scratching your head going, Cahagas, what's the deal with this guy? The Sheik, what's the deal with this guy? You had names like Adam Pearce, who made a name for himself. You had guys like Colt Cabana. You had guys like Rob Conway, Jax Dane. All these wrestlers made a name for themselves in wrestling. When the Sheik debuted in 2009 in the NWA, he debuted in NWA Midwest. He ended up attacking the Midwest heavyweight champion, who was Silas Mason. So if you've ever watched ROH, you may know who Silas Mason is. He defeated Silas to win the championship. He was scheduled for a world title match against Blue Demon Jr. This was to be held in Chicago, but Blue Demon backed out of the match. So Silas Mason, on the other hand, signed up to wrestle the Sheik. The Sheik ended up defeating Young to become a two-time NWA Midwest heavyweight champion. Later in 2010, in July of that year, the Sheik defeated El Gran Apollo to become the North American champion. And in April of 2011, he defeated Colt Cabana in Jacksonville, Florida, to become the 44th officially recognized NWA heavyweight champion. He was stripped of the title less than 3 months later in July of 2011. And officially, the NWA announced that the Sheik had refused to defend the title in Ohio. However, the Sheik's camp said that he was never scheduled for the title defense. He ended up holding the title for only 79 days. He ended up walking away with it I don't believe it was ever returned. It's one of these things of, you may ask, why? Why was he a champion? Well, how did he get there? I think he let the Benjamins do the talking. That more or less, he bought his way to winning the 10 pounds of gold. He bought the championship, and in buying that championship, he thought the property was his. So he ended up walking away with the title, and they ended up vacating that title. And it's one of the, I believe one of the downside or the low points of what the NWA was. That him having the title, him winning that title, he was a quote unquote big fish in a small pond, but in the eyes of NWA, he was a nobody. He let money do the talking, and I'm not sure if it was Trowbridge or who had actual say in allowing him to become champion, but it's one of these things. I look at it and go, NWA made a mistake in letting him become champion. And the only upside of the Sheik is that later on, he and Jacob Fatu ended up forming a tag team and ended up going to MLW and forming Contra Unit. That's the only upside that I see with the Sheik, Joseph Samael, however you look at it. That's some history, in my opinion, and the opinions of a lot of people that I've read online. He never belonged as a NWA 10 pounds of gold champion, and how he got that title and ended up walking away with that title. He should not go in that Hall of Fame, in the Alliance Hall of Fame, in the NWA Hall of Fame, in any Hall of Fame. He shouldn't even, they should give him a no trespassing ticket and just send him to jail.
I couldn't agree more. The only argument I would say against that, and I don't want to argue because I agree with you, is, OJ's still in the NFL Hall of Fame, but
yeah.
But you know what? In that argument, would he be today if he hadn't already been elected? I don't know. I don't know that he would be. And like you said, the Sheik isn't that kind of, the Sheik didn't do the wrestling equivalent of Rush 2,000 yards. So,
No.
right? I appreciate that, guys. Right after, sometime tonight or at latest tomorrow morning, the polls will be up on X, and we always get the main account for the Alliance blog to repost them because it has a bigger reach currently on X than we do. I'll ask one of these guys to make the yes or no posts on Twitter or X right now because I don't use X anymore. I'm a little bit of a radical in my Canadian ways, and I don't use X. So I don't have a Facebook account anymore, and that's just my personal choice. And everybody's good to do their own thing. But we are on Blue Sky, and I do use Blue Sky for TOEG as well. So please follow us there and look for the polls so that you can vote over the next week, and then we'll get two more going. A couple of great comments. Devin Dowling says a top comment for the Sheik on Cage Match as a wrestler he's decent, but as a manager he's god tier. He's the reason why Contra works so well at MLW. Yeah.
He's very, very intense, and I mean those eyes when they zoom in on his facial expressions. I mean he can talk.
Yeah.
And as a wrestler, I mean, he is decent for wrestling, but he could talk the pants off of just about any woman in just the way he does things. He's so intense.
Yeah.
You believe whatever he says.
Yeah.
But it can only go so far. And I mean, talking any Hall of Fame, they don't put talkers in, they put wrestlers in.
Right. Right. Jamin said Steve Corino for the NWA Hall of Fame. Nobody loves Steve Corino more than me. I can tell you he's not a first round ballot offer, nominee from inside the alliance management, for lack of a better term. Just because there are so many that could go in doesn't mean he won't be in the future. But I don't believe he was nominated by anyone, including me. We all nominated 10 people, and he just wasn't one of the first 10 for any of us. Rob Conway for Willie Bowen said should be on there. He will be on the list to be argued for and against this year. I think Jeremy's frozen, unless he's being really still. But there he goes. Okay. The Sheik managed Fatu and tagged with Fatu for like 3 years. So, as mentioned, he's back. He's back. There he is.
Yeah, my laptop froze on me.
Yeah, it happened to me too. Chris Drummond, go Birds. I had no problem with the Sheik winning the 10 pounds of gold. Forget the politics. He was interesting during that time. He didn't do business the right way. Heck, only a minority in the NWA did good business post WCW split. Sure. Yes. I'll put that back up. Okay. I mean, I'll take your word for it. A lot of the people not doing business the right way, I think, was on the promoter side. That's always been my feeling. But Steve Corino, so we're talking about him as an example, he got screwed by NWA promoter after NWA promoter for his entire reign, and finally went, all but said, just take it from me. I'm losing money doing this because, it was stuff like, oh, we don't pay travel, or, you're going to be sleeping at my uncle's house, or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah.
And he's doing business. He didn't walk out with the title. He dropped it to whoever he dropped it to. Ron Killings is also not. He should be, but I'm sure he will be named as a nominee at some point. Flair's not in our Hall of Fame because he doesn't fit the qualifications for Alliance Wrestling Hall of Fame. He doesn't have an indie bend, and that kind of disqualifies him. Blue Demon 100% will be a nominee this year. Nick Aldis has already passed nomination and will be nominated when we do it all at the end of the year. I don't know, Steve G. I don't have X. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram anymore. I get it. But it's really the only way you can vote right now. Unless we figure it out and there's another way that we can do it. That's how we get the votes done. But yeah, Rob Conway will be up as well. That's great. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Jeremy, are you trying to be backstage right now, or you want to get in? No, okay, he's backstage trying to figure that stuff out. All right. Well, so that's the Sheik. That's the Colt Cabana. Here's Chris. Blue Demon for Hall of Fame. Oh my God, you guys even watched the product during the dark times? Look, man, he was nominated by more than one person. This is why we argue for and against and let you guys decide.
Yeah,
I like the Blue Demon, but to each their own. I understand. I understand the initial argument. I'm going to throw this out. Oh, what's Jeremy doing? I'm back on my laptop. Okay, great. Let us know when you need back in, Jeremy. Are you good? All right. Here he is. All right. Great. I feel like people are asking who's going to be nominated. Shinya Hashimoto, not in the first round. Kahagas will be a nominee in the first round. Muda, no. And Steve G will be arguing against Colt Cabana in the Hall of Fame. Jeff Jarrett, no, not actually nominated by anyone in my memory out of the core group of people who created the nominations. But we'll leave it at that for now, and we'll move on from that to a segment we like to call Championship Wrestling from Jeremy.
Attention, everyone. One.
School is in session. Oh boy, is this great!
Let me talk to you.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
It's time for Championship Wrestling from Jeremy.
It's me.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty with Championship Wrestling for Jeremy. You, my friend, you were talking about the highs and lows of TNA's first live event in 8 years.
Yes. So this episode marks the return to live broadcast for TNA after 8 years. And one has to think this is in large part because of the partnership that has formed between WWE and TNA. Overall, the show was really good, while not feeling too overloaded. The show opened at the Boeing Center at Techport in San Antonio, with Santino Marella telling Gia Miller outside that there would be a few surprises this evening. We then see Joe Hendry come out to address the crowd. Santino comes out and Hendry tells him he'll face anyone from anywhere at any time. And this brought out Mid-Card Donut. And he is going to challenge for the title tonight in the main event. We then got a video package from Genesis showcasing the match between Mike Santana and Josh Alexander, which saw Josh quit the match and say he was quitting TNA also. Then the video cuts to Eric Young confronting Josh backstage, asking if he was really going to quit and leave after everything. We then see Eric talking to Steve Macklin about helping Alexander. Macklin says he knows EY will help Josh, but EY doesn't owe Alexander anything. And at that moment, Josh Alexander walked up and says he has no excuses for his past behavior, but wanted to thank them for everything. EY and Alexander shake hands, but Macklin rebuked the offer, leaving Alexander looking bald and sad. Next week, Nick Nemeth will address the TNA audience. And the first match of the night began, and it was a 6 women's tag match with Masa Slamovich tag teaming with Spitfire, Danny Luna, and Jody Havoc versus Rosemary and Heather and Ash by Elegance. In the coming weeks, after I go over the 7 levels of hate thing, I'm going to be doing some investigative reporting on who or what is the By Elegance. Is it a lifestyle brand, a multinational makeup conglomerate, an underground Botox cult? I don't know, but damn it, I'm going to answer the questions that people have been asking. This was a 6-way tag match, nothing more or less. All involved put together a solid outing, and the crowd was involved. The twist came when NXT's Cora Jade showed up and handed Masha an envelope. And inside said envelope was a pic of Masha X'd out in red marker, reminiscent of how Masha would do her next hit list target. This left the opening for Ash to capitalize and get the pin on Luna after shoving her into Slamovich. Josh Alexander's music hits, and he came out to the ring with the Northern Armory in tow. He talked about how he quit TNA at Genesis. He thanked TNA for allowing him to talk, even though they didn't have to. He says they threw everything at Mike Santana, and it wasn't enough. And he hasn't liked who he has been in the past few months anyways. And that's not how he wants to be remembered. He put over the Armory, but they didn't care about any platitudes and attacked Alexander, which brought out Eric Young, who then challenged Icarus and Williams next week to a tag match with Josh Alexander as his partner. Alexander didn't look too happy about this, but we'll see how it plays out. Our second match was TNA World tag champs, the Hardys versus the System's Moose and Dango. This was a quick match, and I wasn't surprised by that. The Hardys are not getting any younger, but they can still hit the spots that get the pops. And honestly, that is all we should be seeing from these two guys. They can't pull off 20 and 30-minute bangers anymore, spot fest with tables, ladders, and chairs, nor do they need to. But they can do the poetry and motions and the swantons, and the crowd eats that shit up. I would have booked Edwards or Myers in the place of Moose, in my opinion. But the Hardys got the win with Jeff nailing Moose with the swanton for the 3. We then see a 23 video, which has been playing the past couple of weeks, little vignette package just saying 23 and some odd nonsense being said around it. And this got Sami Callihan out to the ring, and he's calling out whomever or whatever the 23 is. Steph DeLander came out, and she was holding the TNA Digital Media title, which she won in the divorce, she stated, not even mentioning PCO, which they are quite upset with him about that then. He did not make any friends. But I don't know what happened between him and TNA, so, who's to say? But she also says that she knows who 23 is and introduces her new boy toy, good old Mancer, Mance fucking Warner. Mance comes out and attacks Sammy and takes him out, and then him and Steph have their little schmooze fest in the middle of the ring, making out all slobbery trailer park-like and everything, We then are joined by Ariana Grace on commentary, and she is the official liaison for the NXT. And during this match, she will be commentating as we see the NXT tag team of Fraxium, Nathan Frazier, and Axiom go up against the Rascals for the NXT tag match. This was a good match, and I hope it gets run back in the near future on a bigger stage. I'm not going to give anything away about it. I want people to go watch it and then give me your opinion of it in the comments. Really well put together match. I enjoy what the Rascals do, and with Fraxium, Nathan Frazier, and Axiom, those two, the story that they've got going with will they, won't they, how are they going to implode? It's intriguing right now, and one of my favorite storylines in wrestling going on right now. We then go to Mike Santana gets his moment to talk about Genesis and his goals for 2025, and he states that he will be the TNA World Champion in 2025, but was interrupted by a returning Mustafa Ali. Ali's character work lately has been fucking phenomenal. It's low-hanging fruit, but he pulls it off so well. And I'm glad that he's back, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does between him and Santana and whoever that he may set his sights on after him and Santana are through. I like what he's doing right now, and having him be the next foe for Santana, I think is the logical and good next step in Santana's storyline as to what he's going to do in TNA as well. Tessa Blanchard came out and said some shit. We then go to our main event, TNA World Champ Joe Hendry versus Mid-Card Donut. This was a serviceable match, and I applaud Cardona for the levels of success he has found popping up in various promotions for however long and whatever the situation may call for from him. The man can deliver. With that said, this was any other match that we've seen him in, with the exception of the JBL interference. But even then, I was expecting someone, and I really shouldn't have. Hendry got the win naturally. He just won the title. He's not losing it, especially not to Donut. The real story here, I feel, though, is JBL is in some way pulling strings in the TNA World title picture. But what is the end game with this? And who is JBL taking orders from? And I feel that, like I said, that was the point of this match more than anything. how does JBL play into not just the TNA picture, but who is behind him in this? These are questions that shall be answered down the road. Overall, I enjoyed the episode, and I've seen where TNA is looking to do a live episode a month after this, with the possibility to do more if they see results from it. Like I said, overall, it was a solid outing for them. It was a good return to live for them. It wasn't jam packed. It wasn't overloaded with surprises or anything like that. Not everything hit. Not everything's going to. Yes, I did move on quite quickly past Blanchard because they seem to be leaning into her just embracing the hate, which at the end of the day, she's going to be a heel. So why not lean into it? But I'm all for second chances, but I'm not the one signing her checks, so I'm not going to be the one to fucking carry a torch for her either. I'm not a Tessa Blanchard guy. She had her moment. She fucked up. You know, good on you. You made some amends, and you're getting another chance. I hope it works out for you. I hope that you actually did use this time away to grow, and over time, my opinion of you changes, but I'm not going to, that's all the spotlight she gets this week. The show overall was fantastic. I loved it. Go watch the Fraxium Rascals match. Fucking love what those four are doing. It was just fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Manser Dowling says that popped me.
Yeah, go Manser. I'm hoping to see. I'm hoping to see one called Manders, the best fucking name in the business right now.
That is a great name. What isn't he married to Steph Delander?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So Devin says, "Oh, that's the wrong one. PCO's got to come back now and face mans, right? Was it just a work? Don't know.
I don't know. It from everything that I've read, those in those that you don't want upset were very upset. While it wasn't the actual TNA digital media title, he had agreed that he was going to come back after Genesis and wrap up the story, and they have plans in place, and now those are completely shot. So at the moment, it's a shoot, guys.
Yeah,
it was legit. He's upset. So
Steve says Blanchard was total filler BS. I think Triple H's crew wrote that promo. Blanchard usually does okay promos. This one was terrible. I didn't hear it, so I couldn't tell you. I would say to she's been away for a while, and she did apparently. I remember it got to be 2 years ago now when she posted that photo with La Rosa Negra where they were together and they'd made up, and I guess she apologized. But hey,
and we even speculated then would we see Tessa possibly pop up in the NWA, being that would put her in American promotion, but not the spotlight, not in a promotion that has the spotlight that even TNA had at that time. So she'd still be it'd still be newsworthy, but she wouldn't be in TNA or WWE.
On a related note, Willie had said earlier WWE's going to deplete TNA's wrestling roster, and Sam had said, I'm not happy about the NXT stuff, but the exposure is hoping for the best. And I kind of bring that up here because, I think last week I said, unless they own a piece of it, I don't see why they're doing it. And in listening to other voices, I guess I get it now. And one of the most important things, actually, I say this with a pause, came from Cornette's podcast for me, where he said, well, it's actually a good thing for preemptively saying we're not a monopoly. We can have people, these are independent contractors. Boo to that, by the way. They work for other companies. And, we allow them to do that. And that would maybe we shoot any of that down. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Devin says, Mander's wife Sawyer Wreck hates me and my buddies. Someone commented on her looks on old podcast. Okay, well.
I just saw a thing where she popped back up. Sawyer Wreck, I think she popped up during match at GCW. And if they commented on her looks, I may have an idea of what they said.
Oh.
Wreck is it fits.
I've never seen her, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. There, that's awesome. I look forward to more TNA stuff. I did look forward just before we get to Dave and fantasy booking here to. Well, I did look forward to Saturday night's main event, and I know we weren't going to necessarily talk about that today, but I haven't watched that I can recall beyond the million clips that I see all week long from different wrestling around the world. I haven't sat down and watched a wrestling event from WWE. I don't think in 20 years, and like not from start to finish, and or wandering away or anything like that. And I'm like, Saturday night's main event, like that's an old nostalgic thing to bring. Jesse will be on it. By the way, Ventura, Public Enemy hat. Nice. And I thought I'm really going to enjoy this. And wow, look at these matches: Fatu and Strowman, and it's Gunther. Well, I love Gunther from way back when in the Walter days before WWE. He was great then. He's great now, and I've seen Jey Uso only in clips, and it sucked. What the wrestling on that program sucked. It sucked terribly, and I don't get. Jeremy said like, hey, it's a guy who can do a catchphrase for Jey Uso. I don't get it. I don't see the attraction. I don't see the ability. I don't know. Gunther was good. He carried the whole thing, I thought, and he could wrestle a broomstick like they say. And the other matches weren't great either, and I was disappointed. So maybe Willie's onto something. Does she look worse than Maxie Impaler? I guess that's Sawyer Wreck. I don't know.
It's a handsome woman.
Jeremy, you're only doing TNA recaps now?
No, I'm doing whatever strikes my fancy that week. It's championship wrestling from Jeremy. There's not a caveat with it. Championship wrestling right now is on hold until I can talk about it. So just whatever I decide to talk about that week. I think next week I'll be talking about the first match of the 7 levels of hate. So
that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and then I will. They are starting to announce more matches for the upcoming United Wrestling Network live event in February. So I will start dropping stuff about that, about the matches and stuff.
I wanted to look for
Thunder from 2000. I might.
Jeremy covers.
I might.
You should watch Thunder. That's
Yeah.
how deep into WCW.
I'm not sure that I'll be excited about talking about so many Disco Inferno matches, but
You know who's really excited to talk about Disco Inferno matches?
Glengo
Disco
Brady.
Inferno. I can't stand their podcast, but hey, they probably wouldn't like ours either. Thank you,
I
my
get a
friend.
chuckle out of them.
Yeah. I get hives from them, so there you go.
If there's anyone that smells their farts more than Pat McAfee at the moment, it's fucking Glengo Brady and Conan.
Yeah. But that's the problem. That's the podcast. It's like it's like Jeremy Miller from Denver writes, like, what the fuck's going on with like this thing? And like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Like, I don't even know. Give him the boot. Give him the boot. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, I can't stand you, dude. And I didn't hate Disco when he was on TV. I just hate him now. I main evented. I don't know, man.
Who'd you suck off to get that main event spot, though, Glenn?
Yeah. Does anyone know has Marquez updated his website lately? He does have a new show February 28th. He never updates his website ever. It's garbage. You won't find anything on it. They need some kind of webmaster. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Kansas City can win, and they can have the right to lose to Philadelphia in 2 weeks. Disco fever, baby.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, there you go. So, thank you very much.
My Falcons to win, damn it.
Well, they've had their time in the sun. It's time to move on to good city of Philadelphia. Let us talk to our good friend Dave Scooby Fantasy. I look forward to this one, Scoob, because what if WCW hadn't gone out of business?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Back to you, Tim.
Well, you had asked us earlier if we were WCW guys. Now, I remember watching WCW Monday Nitro. It came on before Raw, an hour before. So I'd watch it downstairs in the basement. I'd videotape Raw, but I'd also videotape as I was watching, flip back and forth in between. I loved wrestling, so I was into more of the acrobatics of wrestling. So I liked what Nitro was doing with that first hour showing the cruiserweights. And it was just one of those things that, what if WCW hadn't ended in 2001? Now, if you know the story, Time Warner, AOL ended up buying out Turner Broadcasting, and in doing so, basically shut down WCW. It's one of these things that Bischoff tried to get WCW, ended up buying it, but they had no outlet. So WCW could have been owned, but they had no TV rights. They had no place to be shown. And this was back in 2001, so streaming may have been around, but we just didn't know it yet. That it's one of these things of, in early March of 2001, WCW got bought out by their biggest rivals. This was after they were shut down. The WWF. Vince McMahon came in, became the undisputed ruler of American pro wrestling. And despite WCW falling quite behind in the Monday Night Wars, it was never meant to end. That when they were bought, it was looked upon as Vince had bought them, but Shane had taken them over. So rather than absorb them into the WWF, they could have been Shane's World Championship Wrestling taking on his dad. But that didn't happen. But we're looking at what happens if WCW never ended in 2001 with Eric Bischoff at the helm. Well, WWF would still end up buying out ECW, but WCW could have still existed. By this time, ECW was a lost cause, and Paul Heyman had transferred over to the WWF as a commentator and as part of the creative team. But however, not all the ECW wrestlers would join the WWF. Some would end up joining WCW instead. Now, WCW's main event scene would change dramatically in the next couple of years. And by 2001, they were actually trying to push new up-and-comers over older talent, with the exception of some, including Sting, Scott Hall, and Hulk Hogan. But they ended up vanishing from programming at this point, although Sting would end up eventually returning. Now, you also look at WCW had Thunder. It could have probably been canceled, although it was taped and could go against SmackDown, which at that time was taped as well. So Nitro also may have been moved to a different day of the week, being that they lost the Monday Night Wars. But back in 2001, there was no way that Nitro was coming back from what they had in the battle with Raw. So another huge effect of WCW sticking around. If they would have stuck around, think about this. Jeff Jarrett and his father would have never formed TNA.
Well, it just got put up on the screen, yeah.
So it's one of these things that the Jarretts formed TNA because WCW was gone, and he knew that WWF wouldn't want him back after what he pulled back in '99 with holding them up for the title. So if WCW stays a thing, Jarrett has a place to call home, and they never formed TNA, at least at this point. This also means that AJ Styles, who in the ending days of WCW was part of their cruiserweight tag team division, he had signed with them in their dying days. He didn't accomplish much, but he was signed to them. So you could possibly have seen him and Air Paris possibly win cruiserweight tag team gold. Or if they split up, he could have won a cruiserweight title and slowly moved up the ranks and into holding gold, not having to go to TNA, which wouldn't have been created at that time. So who knows? That AJ Styles may have been a champion in WCW if they would have stuck around. If he remains in WCW, they were one of the best high-flying tag teams, in my opinion. But before he became a single star by the mid to late 2000s in TNA. Now, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash would probably have returned to WWF since Hogan was pissed at WCW for what had happened at Bash at the Beach. Nash had been written off with a retirement angle, and Scott Hall would stay with, I don't think he would have stayed without any of his friends there, so they probably would have returned to WWF at that time. And Vince would have never turned down the opportunity to bring back the NWO and move it over. But who knows if they would have been the NWO, as that was a creation of WCW. And without Vince owning WCW, he would have just had to bring them back as their former characters. So with if you look at it, if WCW is still around, smaller promotions such as Ring of Honor probably don't become nearly as popular. But however, some of their top players, Bryan Danielson, he ended up going to WWF. CM Punk would be later there, and Samoa Joe they may have gotten there earlier. Or they may have gone to WCW, that there was a chance of them going one or the other. And being that WCW had more of the wrestling aspect than WWF at that time, and they had some of their cruiserweights there that Bryan Danielson would fit in, CM Punk would fit in, Samoa Joe, instead of going to TNA, they may have floated over to WCW. Now, you look at it, I could also see maybe Colt Cabana maybe going to WCW. Claudio, of course, WCW. And maybe Chris Hero heading over there rather than them being in ROH. Brock Lesnar, back in 2004, ended up leaving WWE. He may have not gone back. He left. He wanted a lighter schedule. WCW would have given that. And I mean, they would have given him the money as well. And I don't know, think of back then. Goldberg was big. Imagine Brock and Goldberg going at it in the mid 2000s rather than later on when they were, I don't know, not in their prime.
Right.
So it's one of those things. I mean, think of those dream feuds. I mean, Goldberg, Scott Steiner going against Brock Lesnar. I mean, Samoa Joe. He could have still joined the UFC. And I mean, WCW would have given him that schedule. And I think they would have had a good relationship. That Eric Bischoff, he's very outspoken about legit athletes. He loves mixed martial arts. He wants things to be real. I mean, think about Kurt Angle going over to WCW instead of being in TNA at that time. So, I mean, there could have been some hell of a matches in WCW with the WWF wrestlers that ended up going to TNA. So cruiserweight division, I mean, I've talked about that. Well, now I don't like, I mean, I like the cruiserweights for what they do, but you have to make it look real. And I think WCW's cruiserweights made it real enough that it wasn't, oh, I took 17 different moves and it didn't finish me off. That they would learn how to sell even if you had cruiserweights coming in from all over the world. I mean, I remember WCW having Blitzkrieg. He was a good wrestler, but he was also good at selling at times. He knew when to sell a move and when to pop up out of a move that you could, it was believable. It wasn't a death-defying move. It was a move that transitioned into something else.
Right.
Now, the only real question I have is the women's division. That's sort of tricky to predict back then. But then if you also look at WWF, WWE, that was the Divas era. Early 2000s and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's sort of questionable. But if you look at what happened in TNA, if they could have made that transition in WCW, if Gil Kim would have come to WCW instead, think about that. Awesome Kong.
Oh, yeah.
WCW having female wrestlers, but not bra and panty matches like the WWF and WWE. Well, WWF and WWE had some good wrestlers, female wrestlers. WCW didn't always put the wrestling first, but they had wrestlers that could wrestle. So I'm thinking maybe even Lita after ECW and her little run in WWF. Think about her and the Hardy Boys, that after their problems with the WWF and WWE in like 2003, 2004, and I mean the firing, I mean Matt got fired, Jeff got fired from WWE early 2000s. They were speaking out against Lita and Edge doing their thing. Well, Lita could possibly leave after. By the 2010s, who knows what would have happened. I mean, WCW could possibly be beating the WWE in the ratings because it was a strange ebb and flow for the WWE. I mean, they had huge viewership drops, being what happened with the Chris Benoit incident. And I mean, Benoit left WCW, so that still would have happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, WWE ended up going PG, while WCW would produce good quality wrestling each week. They had a better reputation because they had the standards and practices that they followed. They could have, who knows what would have happened. I mean, you had Vince Russo floating back and forth. If Vince Russo wasn't in TNA at that time, who knows if he would have gone back to WWE or even WCW. So it's one of those things that there's things that may not have taken place. So, I mean, you had a better reputation in WCW for wrestling rather than storylines. And I mean, NXT may never have been formed. It could still be Florida Championship Wrestling, because most of the bigger names that came to NXT or on the indie circuit, they possibly would have gone to WCW instead. So, I mean, no Nexus storyline. And I mean, think about it. I mean, Seth Rollins, Tyler Black.
Yeah.
He may not have left and joined WWE. Tyler Black and John Moxley, they may have been WCW. I mean, AJ Lee could have jumped over if CM Punk would have jumped over. So it's sort of questioning what would have happened to all of these wrestlers. That, I mean, if CM Punk had jumped to WCW, he would have never left wrestling, never got into MMA, wouldn't have gotten the staph infection, wouldn't have ended up leaving, and would have been in wrestling all this time. AEW may not exist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when WWE was getting their ass kicked by WCW, you had, I mean, in WWE, you had Randy Orton, John Cena, and maybe Roman Reigns. They could have been main eventers during this time. But I mean, money talks. That if Eric Bischoff had WCW and the money behind him to bring in all these people, who knows what would have happened. I mean, Kenny Omega could have possibly been brought into WCW. He'd still have the matches in Japan, but Eric Bischoff got so many wrestlers from Japan, got storylines from Japan, NWO Japan. That's where he got the idea. So if bringing in Japanese wrestlers and Mexican wrestlers, I mean, think about, I mean, Omega would have still had matches with Okada in Japan, but they could have both been brought into WCW, bringing in New Japan Pro wrestlers. And think about this. Cody Rhodes may have never ended up in WWE, being that when WCW shut down, Dusty was with them. Dusty Rhodes was there. Goldust, they were both in WCW when it closed. So, I mean, Goldust never became 7. He would have been Dustin Rhodes. He could have brought in his little brother. His dad would have made them the Rhodes brothers. They would have been tag champions. In my eyes, they would have made good tag champions and remained in WCW if they were still around for many years. So, I mean, think about a main event career in WCW for Cody Rhodes. Well, if Cody Rhodes and Omega are there, the Young Bucks are probably there. Young Bucks would have never been in TNA as Generation Me. And I mean, AEW would never be formed, being that several of the guys are already wrestling in WCW. Chris Jericho, in my opinion, would have returned to WCW where he started because he had much to prove in WCW, whereas he was never one of their heavyweight champions. So after his time being in New Japan, if WCW was still around by 2018 and 19, before AEW being formed, if WCW was around, I think Jericho would have made his name and made his way back to WCW. Now, overall wrestling as a whole is probably a lot better now, being that there are different places that exist for wrestlers to wrestle, that if WCW was around, TNA might not be around, ROH might not be around, AEW might not be around. But seeing that let's see, that I have WCW was a viable competitor that hopefully kept them from making bad decisions. But for that time and space, WWE really didn't have, they had competitors, but no main competitors. That TNA Impact was always competing, but never quite on that level. Same thing with ROH. So it's one of these things of, we see a much more balanced wrestling landscape. But if you look at it, I myself would have liked if WCW would have stuck around, but there was no TV. But if they had stuck around, and even with the AOL Time Warner, it's my understanding that Eric Bischoff had backers that he was going to bring in. Now, without them being on TBS or TNT, it's one of those things that they could have either started their own TV network, or if they would have been able to go back to the old days, they could have just bought time. That money talks and bullshit walks.
That's right.
That if you have enough money, you'll there's a time and a place for everything. That rather than showing reruns of Andy Griffith, TBS and TNT may have shown it, but there was somebody, some network that was willing to pay or get paid to show wrestling. Because, I mean, in my heart of hearts, everybody has a memory of like Saturday night wrestling, Saturday morning wrestling. Everybody has a memory of it, whether you like it or you don't like it. You have a memory of it. It's something that has always been there, whether it's in the background or the foreground, whether you hate it or love it. To have a hate for something that you don't like shows that you like it somehow. I may say, oh, I don't like liver and onions. But at one time, how do I know I don't like it if I've never tried it? That I either tried it and didn't like it, but I at least tried it. So it's one of these things of WCW. I would have been very surprised if they wouldn't have stayed around. The only reason they didn't stay around was because Time Warner, AOL didn't see them as a viable part of Time Warner, of Turner Broadcasting. And I mean, you think about it now, all the properties that have shown wrestling over the years, that TNA was created because WCW went away. ROH sort of filled in here and there. But if WCW had never gone away, whether it was on Turner or somewhere else, if they had maintained their momentum of when they had their 83 weeks and their battles in the Monday Night Wars, it may have been for the better, and WWF, WWE wouldn't have had their quote-unquote run as the big dog and just letting anything happen.
Right.
They would have had to be creative and actually run good shows, have good quality storylines. The Katie Vick story would have probably never happened.
Oh.
And I know that breaks your heart, Tim, but
Kane knows what he did.
Yep. But I mean, it's one of these things that in my head, I think it would have worked at least for a few years. I'm not sure if it would have made it to present day. But as many connections as Eric Bischoff had, they could have had a good run at least for the next 3 to 4 years, and then branched off. Whether WWE ever ends up buying them, who knows? But in my eyes, WCW could have had a success. But looking back, World Championship Wrestling was NWA before it was WCW. And they were maybe 10, 11 years as World Championship Wrestling. So if they would have been given a couple more years to build up, who knows what would have happened. Triple H, he was a WCW guy. Maybe he would have still been with WCW.
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels may have lost his smile and gone over to WCW. Who knows how many people would have bounced back and forth, and if they had the money, the plane of pro wrestling would have been very different. So who knows?
Wow. It's almost like everything could be different, right? From the butterfly effect in pro wrestling. You always get good comments. You have had more comments on this than anything before. I'm gonna try to run through them as much as I can for you. Scooby Simon's son. So Willie Goldberg defeats Hogan in WCW. He loved it. Great. Sam was just saying this is a great topic. Goldberg's the man in '98, and but a little overused. But Devin Dowling has a whole bunch of these as we come through here. Jeff Jarrett becomes a 20-time WCW champion. It's certainly possible. He was perfectly serviceable and incredibly reliable, which is why he was champion for so long. Anyway, whether you like Chronic. So you were the guy who liked Chronic. Okay.
I did too.
Jeremy likes
Yeah.
Oh, the wrestling team. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That too, yeah.
They were serviceable.
Yeah. I knew
Could have been
WCW
Chronic, the
was-
Green Machine.
That's right. I knew with their manager Mary Jane, and I don't know.
Yeah.
They should have gone all out on that. Should have just embraced it completely.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Steve G. I knew WCW was doomed when Bischoff and signed Russo, and 2 years later, Hart. That was the end of WCW. Sam was mad when Vince buried Kronos. I guess that's a little later on. Devin Dowling, Shane O'Mac, bought it right out from under the nose of his father. The name of the contract does say McMahon, but it doesn't say Vince. I was about 6 months away from not watching wrestling for a really long time until 2019 after this. So it was almost about 20 years at that point. Where are we going? This should have rebooted it with Shane running it. There wouldn't be a TNA, Willie agrees, if WCW was still in business. Steve said it could have existed, but not after signing Russo and Hart. That's certainly part of it, I think. Willie likes the Nitro Girls. TNA was WCW 2002 to 2005. There's something to that, I think, for sure, right?
Yeah, there's a little truth to that. The Asylum years, yeah, I've been going back and watching those with my TNA Plus subscription, and it's WCW light for sure.
Right. Hogan 96-98 at the time was fire. Willie does not care for the man. I mean, he's on tape, so there you go. Not Willie, Hogan. So there's certainly some truth to that. Scott Hall fired around this time, appearing in 2000 for ECW. Sam, NW was good at the beginning. They lost their way just like the Bloodline. Keep bringing in new wrestlers to keep it going. Willie and Retro have a discussion about Tank Abbott and there being badasses in WCW. The problem for me with Tank was that, and I hear that he was totally willing. He did that whole 3 count thing, as well. He just didn't have it, which is not to say he wasn't a badass. Like Kimbo Slice was a badass, but
I mean, Tank Abbott. Think if Dan Severn would have come back to WCW, if they would have brought him in, it's one of those things that you have some MMA fighters that come in and want to prove themselves that, hey, we're the real fighters.
Right.
Eric Bischoff had a love for MMA and karate and mixed martial arts, all that. So, it could have been plausible that, it could have been a work shoot type thing if they would have been able to bring them in and make maybe a 3 to 4 month storyline out of it to put over the wrestlers. But you have Severin who 10 pounds of gold. That's it right there. If he comes in, whether he wrestles or is just a spokesperson for a couple people, you could make some people, whether it's wrestlers or MMA fighters, that could have been basically like underground wrestling before underground wrestling.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. I guess they could have even gone if they were stupid, they'd gone the brawl for all way and tried to have these guys knock each other out again. But We all know how that turned out. Crockett Promotions, Steve says, WCW made WWF or WWE. Most of all of WWFE came from Crockett and WCW. Portions from UWF and AWA also. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of guys that came there, but WCW folding didn't do anything for, like, WWE was already firmly in control. But, I mean, some of those guys didn't come over, like the big names didn't come over right away because they were still under contract and they were just going to ride it out at home. The big dollars and, you know, the Kevin Nashes and the Scott Halls and Sting didn't really have much interest. And that's why the fusion didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned Scott Hall. Scott Hall was never a heavyweight champion in any organization.
Yeah, that's right.
He was always right under there. He was always either intercontinental or he didn't have to be a champion to be over. But think about if he would have gone against Goldberg and ended up winning.
Yeah. Yeah. In many ways, he was a Piper type.
Yeah.
Just didn't need the belt.
He didn't need the championship.
Yeah.
But imagine if he would have been champion.
Yeah, wow. He could have been relied upon if you got his life under control. Devin Dowling is what I wanted to get to some of his. He's got some scenarios. So an unhappy Steve Austin doesn't take his ball and go home in 2002. He takes his ball and goes to WCW to win World War III and face WCW champion Jeff Jarrett at Sold Out. And then they think he means Super Brawl. Yeah, that's fun. Steve G says, hey, Dave, this should be a show that you do. How the majority of your key wrestlers in WWF came from Crockett and in WCW.
Okay.
There's a good one there. You were talking about Dustin and Barry, I believe, at one point. They were tag champs. And here's another one. Kurt Angle, the WCW in 2006, enters War Games as a mystery partner for Team Stone Cold versus the NWO 2006. Can you imagine? I mean, the Giant returns to WCW in 2011 after a contract dispute just to lose his first match to WCW champion Samoa Joe. In this universe, the Giant never falls to his death from the roof after the monster truck match with Hogan. Jerry Saggs goes down in history as the greatest WCW hardcore champion of all time. Really not a fan of Nasty Boy Jerry Saggs. Fox Sports obviously wanted wrestling on the network back then, and TNA took over most of WCW's syndication too. A lot of this, I think, what happens is Ted Turner likes wrestling, and when Turner goes through the merger with AOL, I think, he's out and he's fine. He's happy to be out, but there's nobody stepping in to go, oh no, Ted was right with the wrestling, and there's a lot of people just going, I don't want that on our network, and that was part of the downfall too, that it was a corporation and no Vince at the helm. After years of being a black and white crow-like figure, Sting returns to the Great American Bash in the red, white, and blue. If they hadn't killed Sting, maybe he wouldn't have, just like he came back after all that time, faced Hogan and lost. Like, it was the worst shutdown I'd ever seen.
Yep.
Sam loved Katie Vick's storyline. He was all about it. He couldn't wait for it to see more of it. He just wanted Kane to win.
Yeah, motherfuckers are fucked up.
Here's my favorite hypothetical. Mike Tenay is able to retire in 2015 with respect from the fan base that he's deserved. Wow.
Hey, you know the fan base that always respected Mike Tenay? All those 60-something middle-aged women that he picked up and took back to the hotel room at the bar after the shows.
Wow.
He'll never lose their respect.
Wow.
Tony Schiavone said it, not me.
Well, okay. I don't know. I can't agree with you. And when the lawsuit comes, I don't want to be part of it. Triple H wouldn't be Triple H; it'd still be terrorizing or Jean-Paul Levesque at some point, I think. Right? Let me see. WCW was trying to bring in Severn, but he was in WWF. Bam Bam Bigelow, Vader, some of the best ever. I haven't read any of these ones yet, but we're almost down there. The big names staying out of the Vince purchase hurt WCW credibility. Yeah. There was, when you had DDP, and I love DDP as like your biggest guy, or Booker, who turned out really well, but Booker wasn't a big name in WWF when he came, he wasn't the guy he became when he came over.
Yeah.
He was the one guy you could argue was a success out of that whole thing. Roddy Piper was a U.S. heavyweight champion. Yes, he was. Back in when they had that same national title looking one that NWA has today. I am referring to Undertaker, Guerrero, Jericho, Austin, Nash, Benoit. They all came from Crockett W. Yeah, okay. Well, fair enough. They certainly did. 4 of them at the same time, including Guerrero and Benoit. Saturn and Malenko.
Yep.
The Radicals. First game ever. Owen Hart was there. And so that was fun, man. That was fun. I whenever we finish these things, if you're ever like thinking about the stuff out there, you guys who are kind enough to watch us talk, you have to ask yourself one question when you're using this stuff. What would Scooby do? I found this hat when it is back online. So they don't sell it right now, but when it comes back, I'm sending you this hat, Scoob.
All right,
you, buddy. I got it in my wish list on Amazon. I guess we can kind of wrap it up at this point. One moment. I am being there is a masked man in my living room right now who is handing me something. And I'd love to get the camera on him, but he has quickly departed. And he's handed me a book. The Midnight Reader has pointed out that this is an excellent book about what we're talking about. Nitro, the incredible rise and inevitable collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. Is by a man named Guy Evans. And what he does in this 600-page book is he talks not only to the Bischoffs and the DDPs and people who were there, Goldbergs and Hogans and stuff. He talks to the accountants, and he talks to the marketing people, and he talks to the internet guy, and he talks to people at the network, and he tries to put together in a very comprehensive book what happened to WCW. You guys remember that documentary in 2024 that didn't go anywhere? Who's to blame or something like that? Whose fault? Well, I forget what it was called.
Fucking fluff piece for why Eric Bischoff didn't do it.
Right, exactly. This is a great book. And I am told that at some point soon there will be a number of books on a monthly basis through this show, which you will be able to win if your name is drawn and you do stuff like follow us on Blue Sky. The Midnight Rider. No, this is the Midnight Reader. He looks a bit like the Midnight Rider, but and there was a whole bunch of talking on the side about fellow babies and I don't know, other stuff like that. But he's a book reader. You need this book. Yeah, well, I got a box that I apparently is still sitting in my shipping office that is waiting to go out to you, Sam. So anyway, I'll get on it. I swear, it's only been like a year and a half. That's it. That's it for us. That's it. That's all. So we'll see you all next week, but I won't be here in 2 weeks because the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. These two guys will be on their own, and we'll take it from there. But until next time, we'll see you at the matches.
Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you'll never miss a future episode? I'd also like to remind you we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. before NWA Power. You can find us on social media at The Alliance Blog, and until next time, we are The Alliance.